Elena had been walking for nearly an hour, her sandals pinching her feet with every step along the uneven forest path. The pale green dress her mother had spent weeks sewing swished gently around her ankles, catching small twigs and leaves as she moved. She kept glancing up at the darkening sky, calculating how much time remained before the mating ceremony began. If she kept this pace, she would arrive with only minutes to spare, her hair a little wind-blown perhaps, but present, which was the only thing that truly mattered tonight. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory from earlier that evening. "This is your chance, Elena. The Alpha King himself will be there. Do not be late." Elena had nodded along, letting the words wash over her the way she always did when her mother spoke about opportunity and duty in the same breath. She had never been the type of girl who dreamed of standing before powerful men, waiting to be chosen like a prize on display, but she also understood what tonight meant for her family, for her pack, for the quiet respectability that came with being noticed by someone important. She adjusted the small pouch tied at her hip, the one she carried everywhere out of habit, filled with basic herbs and bandages in case anyone needed help along the way. Her healer's instincts never fully switched off, even on a night meant for something entirely different. The scream tore through the trees before Elena even reached the edge of the forest path. She stopped walking. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and for a moment she forgot about the ceremony, the dress she wore, and the entire reason she had left her house that evening. Somewhere beyond the dark line of pine trees, someone was in trouble. She had exactly 40 minutes to reach the mating ceremony grounds. Every unmated wolf in the region was expected there tonight, standing in a row under the moonlight, while the visiting Alpha King walked past them, deciding who might catch his eye. Missing it was not something anyone in her pack would forgive easily. Her mother had spent weeks sewing the pale green dress she wore now, insisting that Elena needed to look her best, that this night could change her entire life. But the scream came again, weaker this time, and Elena's feet were already moving before her mind finished deciding. She lifted the hem of her dress and ran into the trees, her sandals sinking into the soft dirt. Branches scratched against her arms as she pushed forward, following the sound. Her breath came fast, sharp gasps of cold night air, and she called out into the darkness. "Where are you? Keep making noise so I can find you." A groan answered her, low and pained, somewhere to her left. She turned, spotting a shape crumpled near the base of an old oak tree. A man lay there, one leg twisted at a wrong angle, his shirt torn and dark with blood along his side. His eyes were half closed, and his breathing came in shallow, uneven pulls. Elena dropped to her knees beside him without a second thought. She had trained as a healer since she was 12 years old, learning from the pack's elder healer, memorizing every herb, every technique for stopping bleeding, every trick for keeping a person alive until real help could arrive. None of that training had ever felt as urgent as it did in this moment. "Can you hear me?" she asked, pressing 2 fingers against his neck to check his pulse. It was there, but weak and too fast. The man's eyes opened slightly. He looked at her, confusion and pain mixing on his face. Who are you?" "My name is Elena. I'm a healer. Don't try to talk, just stay still." She tore a strip of fabric from the bottom of her dress without hesitation, pressing it firmly against the wound on his side. He hissed in pain, his hand grabbing weakly at her wrist. "It's all right," she said, keeping her voice steady, even though her own hands trembled. "I need to stop the bleeding first. Then we'll worry about the leg." The man studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he could trust her. In the moonlight filtering through the branches above them, Elena could see he was young, maybe a few years older than her, with dark hair matted against his forehead from sweat and dirt. His clothes were plain, unmarked by any symbol of rank or pack, though something about the way he carried himself, even wounded and half-conscious, suggested he was not an ordinary traveler. "You should go," he said through gritted teeth. "Get help. Don't waste time on me." "I am helping you," Elena said firmly. "Talking is wasting time. Be quiet and let me work." Despite the pain etched across his features, something like a small, disbelieving smile crossed his lips. He stopped arguing. Elena worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced precision, even as her mind raced through everything she needed to do. The wound on his side was deep, but had missed anything vital, as far as she could tell. The real danger was the blood loss, and the possibility that his leg injury had caused internal damage she couldn't see. She needed more supplies than the small pouch she carried out of habit whenever she left home. She glanced toward the direction of the ceremony grounds. The moon was already climbing higher, which meant time was slipping away. If she left now, she might just make it in time, sweaty and disheveled, but present. Every part of her sensible mind told her this was not her responsibility. Someone else would find him. She could send help back once she reached the gathering. But looking down at the stranger's face, pale and struggling to stay conscious, she knew she couldn't do that. If she left, even for the time it would take to get help and return, it might be too late. "I need to get more supplies from my bag at home," she said, mostly to herself. "That's too far. I have to make do with what I have here." She unwound the sash from around her waist, using it to bind his leg tightly enough to keep it stable without cutting off circulation. Her fingers worked fast, tying knots she had learned years ago, whispering small words of encouragement to the man as she moved. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to keep him talking, trying to keep him awake and aware. He hesitated, his eyes flickering toward her before looking away. "Does it matter? It might help me know how to treat you. Different packs have different blood conditions sometimes." It was a small lie, something she said just to keep the conversation going, but it seemed to work. He let out a breath that might have been a laugh if he had the strength for it. "Call me Colin," he said finally, though something in his tone made her wonder if that was even his real name. "All right, Colin, stay with me. You're doing fine." Elena continued working through the night, checking his pulse every few minutes, adjusting the bandage on his side when it started soaking through, keeping him talking whenever his eyes began to drift closed for too long. The forest around them grew quieter as the hours passed, the sounds of nocturnal animals settling into a strange, watchful silence, as if the woods themselves understood something important was happening beneath their branches. At one point, Colin's breathing became so shallow that Elena feared she was losing him. She pressed her palms hard against his chest, feeling for the rhythm of his heart, whispering urgently for him to stay awake, to keep fighting. Slowly, his breathing steadied again, and relief washed through her so strongly that her hands shook. "You're not allowed to give up," she told him, her voice fierce despite the exhaustion pulling at her limbs. "Not on my watch." "Bossy," he murmured, barely audible, for someone who was supposed to be somewhere else tonight. Elena froze for a second, surprised he had noticed her dress, the careful styling of her hair that had long since come undone, the signs that she had been dressed for something important, before ending up kneeling in the dirt beside him. "How did you know that?" "The dress," he said weakly, "and you keep glancing toward the east, like you're thinking about something you're missing." She looked away, focusing instead on checking the bandage again. "It doesn't matter. This is more important." "What was it?" he pressed, his curiosity apparently strong enough to fight through the pain. "The ceremony, wasn't it? Everyone from every pack around here was talking about it for weeks." Elena didn't answer right away. She busied herself with adjusting the makeshift splint on his leg, buying herself time before she finally spoke. "Yes, the mating ceremony. I was supposed to be there tonight. And you left to help a stranger in the woods instead. You were dying. The ceremony would have happened whether I was there or not." Colin studied her for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his tired eyes. Not everyone would make that choice. "Then not everyone has their priorities straight," Elena replied simply, checking his pulse once more. As the night wore on, she managed to stabilize him enough that his breathing evened out, and his color began to return, just slightly, to his face. She knew he still needed real medical attention, proper treatment beyond what she could provide with torn fabric and forest instinct, but for now, he was no longer in immediate danger of slipping away. Near dawn, exhaustion finally caught up with both of them. Elena sat back against the tree trunk beside him, her muscles aching, her dress ruined beyond repair, streaked with dirt and blood. She had missed the ceremony entirely. By now, it would be over. Whatever chance she might have had to stand before the visiting Alpha King, to be considered among the candidates, was gone. She surprised herself by not feeling as devastated about that as she probably should have. "You're still here," Colin murmured, his eyes half open, watching her. "Someone has to make sure you don't do anything foolish, like trying to move before your leg heals properly." "I meant," he said slowly, You could have left once I was stable, gone to find help, gone home, but you stayed." Elena looked at him, this stranger whose real name she still didn't know, whose face she had memorized more thoroughly than she had memorized any of the noble candidates' names being discussed at the ceremony for weeks beforehand. "I couldn't leave you alone out here," she said simply. "Not when you needed someone." He seemed to consider this for a long moment, his expression difficult to read in the pale light of early morning. "Thank you, Elena. I won't forget this." Something in the way he said her name, careful and deliberate, made her feel oddly seen, as if he understood exactly what she had given up to be here with him. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the practical matter of getting him real help now that the sun was beginning to rise. "Can you hear anyone nearby?" she asked, straining her own ears for any sign of other travelers or search parties. "Do you have people looking for you?" Colin's expression shifted, something guarded crossing his features. "I was traveling alone, but others will notice I haven't checked in." "Checked in with who?" He didn't answer, and Elena decided not to push. Whatever secrets this stranger carried were not hers to demand, not when he had trusted her enough to let her tend his wounds through the night. "I'll go find help," she said, rising stiffly to her feet. "There's a village not far from here. I can bring back people who can carry you to proper care." "Elena," Colin said, and something in his voice made her turn back to look at him. "Whatever you were supposed to gain tonight, at that ceremony, I hope it wasn't worth more than what you did instead." She smiled, tired but genuine. "I think I'll find out soon enough." As she walked away to find help, unaware of how quickly her life was about to change, unaware of exactly who she had spent the night saving, Elena felt strangely at peace with her choice. The ceremony was gone, the opportunity missed, but she had done what felt right, and that had to count for something. She had no way of knowing that somewhere across the region, the entire gathering she missed had been thrown into confusion by her absence, or that the powerful figure she had been meant to meet was already asking questions about the healer who never arrived. She had no way of knowing that the wounded stranger she left resting against the oak tree was far more important than his plain clothes suggested, or that finding real help for him would set into motion events far bigger than she could imagine. All she knew, walking through the brightening forest with her ruined dress and exhausted body, was that she had made the right choice. Whatever came next, she would face it without regret. The village came into view faster than she expected, smoke curling from morning fires, the first signs of the day's activity stirring among the small cluster of homes. She quickened her pace, calling out for help before she had even fully reached the nearest house, her voice carrying urgency that immediately drew attention. Within minutes, she had gathered 2 strong men, willing to help carry the injured stranger back to proper shelter, along with a cart that would make the journey easier on his broken leg. As they made their way back into the forest, Elena's mind kept drifting to the man's careful, guarded answers, the way he refused to fully explain who he was, or why he had been traveling alone through dangerous woods at night. Something about him felt important, though she couldn't have said why. When they reached the oak tree, Colin was still conscious, though clearly weaker than before. The men lifted him carefully onto the cart, and Elena walked alongside, monitoring his condition the entire way back to the village, refusing to let her attention waver, even for a moment. By the time they reached a proper house with a real bed and better supplies, the sun had fully risen, casting warm light across a night that had changed everything, though Elena still had no idea just how much. As the village healer took over his care, finally allowing Elena to step back and rest, she found herself lingering near the doorway, watching the stranger's chest rise and fall steadily now, no longer the frightening shallow breaths from hours before. Relief settled over her, deep and warm, chasing away the last of her lingering worry. She had missed the ceremony. She had missed her chance to stand before the Alpha King, to be considered, to change her fate according to the traditions everyone expected her to follow. But watching Colin breathe steadily, alive because she had chosen to stop and help rather than walk past, Elena couldn't bring herself to feel even the smallest trace of regret. Whatever tomorrow held, she would meet it with the same certainty that had guided her tonight. She only wished she knew how quickly tomorrow would arrive, and how completely it would rewrite everything she thought she understood about her life. The village healer, an older woman named Hazel with steady hands and decades of experience, examined Colin thoroughly once he was settled in a proper bed. She checked the wound on his side, nodding approvingly at the work Elena had done to stop the bleeding. Whoever bandaged this knew what they were doing, Hazel said, glancing toward Elena with genuine respect. Another hour without proper pressure, and he might not have made it. I only did what I was trained to do, Elena replied, feeling suddenly shy under the praise. Trained or not, you made the right choices under pressure. That matters more than most people realize. Hazel continued examining the leg injury, gently probing along the bone. This break will need to be set properly, and he will need rest for several weeks before he can walk normally again. But he will recover. You gave him that chance. Elena stayed at the small house through the morning, unwilling to leave until she was certain Colin was truly stable. She busied herself fetching water, preparing a simple broth from the herbs in her pouch, and checking on him periodically as he drifted in and out of exhausted sleep. Each time his eyes opened and found her still there, something like quiet gratitude passed across his face before he slipped back into rest. Around midday, as Elena finally allowed herself to sit down and eat something after the long night, she overheard two village men talking near the doorway, their voices hushed but audible. They say the Alpha King himself was furious when the ceremony ended, one man said. One of the candidates never showed up at all. Just vanished without a word. Strange thing to do, missing a chance like that, the other replied. You would think anyone invited to stand before him would move heaven and earth to be there. Elena's stomach tightened at the words, though she kept her expression neutral, focusing on her food. She had known, of course, that missing the ceremony would draw attention, that her absence would be noticed and discussed, but hearing it spoken aloud by strangers who had no idea she was the very person they were gossiping about made the reality feel suddenly much larger than it had felt kneeling beside Colin in the darkness of the forest. She wondered, briefly, what the Alpha King himself looked like, what kind of man commanded such fear and fascination among people who had likely never even met him personally. She had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. Alpha King Kellen, ruler of the largest and most powerful pack territory in the region, known for his sharp judgment and his reputation for never tolerating disrespect. The idea that she had unknowingly disrespected him, simply by choosing to save a life instead of attending his ceremony, sat uneasily in her chest, though she pushed the feeling aside as quickly as it arrived. She had made her choice. She would not spend her energy regretting it now. By late afternoon, Colin was awake and alert enough to hold a proper conversation, though Hazel insisted he remain resting for at least another day before attempting to travel anywhere. Elena sat beside his bed, having finally changed out of her ruined dress into a simple borrowed tunic offered by one of the village women. You look more comfortable, Colin observed, his voice stronger now than it had been through the long night. I feel more comfortable, Elena admitted, managing a small laugh. That dress was never meant for crawling through forest undergrowth. I am sorry about that, the dress I mean, and the ceremony. Elena shook her head firmly. Don't apologize. I already told you, this was more important. Colin studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes thoughtful despite the lingering exhaustion still visible in his face. Most people would have made a different choice. I want you to understand that I know what you gave up. You keep saying that as though I regret it, Elena said, meeting his gaze steadily. I don't. Whatever happens next, I made the right decision, and nothing anyone says will convince me otherwise. Something shifted in his expression then, an emotion she couldn't quite name settling behind his eyes. I believe you, he said quietly. That is a rare thing to witness. Someone so certain about doing what is right, even when it costs them something significant. They sat together for a while longer, the conversation drifting toward lighter topics, small observations about the village, about the weather, about nothing of real consequence. Yet Elena found herself enjoying the exchange more than she expected. There was something easy about talking to Colin, now that the crisis had passed, something that made the hours feel shorter than they should have. As evening approached again, Elena finally prepared to return to her own home, knowing her family would be worried about her extended absence. Before she left, Colin reached out and caught her hand gently, his grip weak but earnest. Thank you again, Elena. I mean that with everything I have. You did not just save my leg or stop my bleeding. You may have saved far more than you realize. Elena smiled, gently pulling her hand back. Just rest and heal properly. That is thanks enough for me. Walking home through the quiet evening light, Elena allowed herself to finally process everything that had happened over the past day. She had missed the most important ceremony of her young life, an event that could have changed her entire future. She had spent the night in the forest, tending to a wounded stranger, whose true identity remained a mystery, someone who spoke with careful evasiveness about his origins and his purpose for traveling alone through dangerous woods. Yet despite everything, despite the uncertainty and the exhaustion pulling at every muscle in her body, Elena felt strangely lighter than she had in weeks. The pressure of the ceremony, the expectation that had weighed on her shoulders since the invitation first arrived, had lifted entirely, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing she had done something that truly mattered. She had no idea, walking those final steps toward her own front door, that her simple choice to help a stranger in the woods had already set into motion a chain of events that would reach far beyond anything she could have imagined. She had no idea that somewhere across the region, powerful people were already asking pointed questions about the healer who vanished before the ceremony, or that the man she had spent the night saving carried more weight and consequence than his plain traveling clothes ever suggested. All she knew, as she finally stepped through her own doorway and collapsed onto her bed for a well-earned rest, was that tomorrow would bring answers to questions she had not yet thought to ask. Sleep claimed her quickly, deep and dreamless, the kind of rest that only comes after a night spent doing something truly worthwhile. The great hall where the mating ceremony had taken place still buzzed with tension long after the event officially ended. Rows of lanterns hung from the high wooden beams, casting warm light over a crowd that lingered despite the late hour, unwilling to leave until every detail of the evening's strange turn had been thoroughly discussed. Alpha King Kellen stood near the raised platform at the front of the hall, his arms crossed, his expression carefully controlled in front of his audience, even as anger simmered just beneath the surface. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made rooms fall quiet whenever he entered them. Tonight, that presence had done nothing to prevent the one disruption he could not tolerate. Someone had simply failed to appear. "Explain it to me again," Kellen said, his voice low and controlled, directed at the pack elder standing nervously beside him. "How does a woman invited specifically to this ceremony simply vanish without word or explanation?" The elder, a thin man named Owen, who served as a liaison between the visiting packs and Kellen's court, shifted uncomfortably under the weight of the question. "Your Majesty, we have sent word to her pack. They claim she left for the ceremony on time, dressed and ready. No one has seen her since." "No one," Kellen repeated flatly. "A woman disappears on the very night she is meant to stand before me, and no one has any explanation. We are searching, Your Majesty. It is possible something happened to her along the way." Kellen's jaw tightened at the thought, though he was careful not to let too much concern show on his face. He told himself his frustration stemmed purely from the disrespect of the situation, from the insult of being treated as though his ceremony held no importance. He refused to examine too closely the small, nagging worry that had settled in his chest the moment he learned of her absence, worry that had nothing to do with his pride, and everything to do with genuine concern for a stranger he had never even met. Around the hall, whispers continued among the gathered nobles and candidates, some amused by the scandal, others clearly nervous about how the king might react to such a public slight. A young woman named Vivian, one of the candidates who had presented herself earlier that evening with obvious eagerness, approached Kellen with a carefully practiced smile. "Your Majesty," she said smoothly, "perhaps it is for the best. Anyone who would show such disregard for an invitation from you clearly does not understand the honor being offered." Kellen glanced at her without much interest, his mind still occupied by the mystery of the missing woman. "Perhaps," he said non-committally, though something about Vivian's eager dismissal of the situation only deepened his curiosity about the woman who had chosen to stay away. As the hall slowly emptied and the last of the guests departed into the night, Kellen remained standing near the platform, staring out at the empty space where dozens of hopeful candidates had stood mere hours earlier. He thought about the invitation list, about the brief description he had been given of each candidate before the ceremony began. The missing woman, Elena, had been described simply as a healer from a modest pack, known for her skill and her quiet dedication to her craft. Nothing about that description suggested someone who would deliberately snub a royal invitation for no reason. Something else must have happened. something significant enough to keep her away despite the obvious consequences of her absence. "Find her," Kellen said finally, turning to Owen, with renewed determination in his voice. "I want to know exactly what happened tonight, and I want to know before the sun rises tomorrow." Owen bowed quickly. "Yes, Your Majesty. I will send our best trackers immediately." As Kellen finally retired to his private chambers that night, sleep proved elusive despite the exhaustion of the long ceremony. His mind kept circling back to the mystery of the absent healer, wondering what could have possibly kept her away, wondering why the thought of her disappearance bothered him so much more than it should have, for a woman he had never even met. He told himself repeatedly that his interest was purely a matter of principle, of maintaining order and respect within his territory. Yet as the night wore on, and sleep continued to avoid him, he found himself imagining the various explanations for her absence, each scenario more concerning than the last. Perhaps she had been injured. Perhaps something dangerous had happened along her journey to the ceremony grounds. The possibility that she had simply chosen not to come, out of fear or disinterest, felt somehow less troubling than the alternatives, though he could not quite explain why that mattered to him at all. Morning arrived with news that only deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. One of Kellen's own scouts, a loyal and capable young man who had been sent ahead the previous day to survey the roads for safety before the ceremony, had failed to check in as expected. Search parties were already being organized to look for him as well, and Kellen found himself standing in the war room of his estate, staring at a map of the surrounding territory, trying to piece together how two separate people could vanish on the very same night, without any apparent connection between them. "Perhaps they are connected," suggested Derek, one of Kellen's most trusted enforcers, standing beside the map, with his arms crossed thoughtfully. "The roads near the ceremony grounds pass close to the forest, where our scout was last seen heading." Kellen's eyes narrowed as he considered this possibility, a new theory beginning to form in his mind, one that felt both unlikely and strangely plausible at the same time. "You think the healer and our missing scout might be connected somehow?" "It is possible, Your Majesty. Perhaps she encountered him along her journey. Perhaps something happened that required her attention." The thought settled over Kellen with unexpected weight. If Elena had encountered his scout in some kind of trouble, if she had chosen to help him rather than continue on to the ceremony, it would explain her absence in a way that suddenly made far more sense than any scenario he had previously considered. It would also mean she had made a choice that spoke volumes about her character, choosing to help a stranger over securing her own future and standing. "Send trackers along that route immediately," Kellen ordered, his voice sharp with renewed purpose. "I want answers, and I want them today." As the search parties departed into the forest, following the same path Elena had walked the previous evening, Kellen found himself unable to remain idle in his estate, waiting passively for news to arrive. Against the advice of his advisors, who insisted such matters were beneath his personal involvement, he decided to accompany the search himself, driven by a curiosity he could not fully explain even to himself. The forest looked peaceful in the morning light, birds calling from the high branches, sunlight filtering down through the canopy in soft golden patches. It was difficult to imagine anything dangerous or dramatic having occurred here mere hours earlier, yet as the search party moved deeper along the path, following faint signs of disturbed undergrowth and broken branches, Kellen felt a growing certainty that they were close to uncovering the truth. It was Derek who first spotted the signs near the old oak tree. Dark stains on the ground that could only be blood, torn fabric caught on nearby branches, clear evidence that something significant had happened at this exact location. Kellen knelt beside the marks, his enforcer's instincts taking over as he examined the scene with careful attention. "Someone was badly injured here," he said quietly, studying the pattern of the blood, the way the ground had been disturbed by what appeared to be careful, deliberate movement, rather than a struggle. And someone else worked to help them. This was not violence, this was treatment. "The healer," Derek said, understanding dawning in his voice. "She must have found our scout here, injured, and stayed to help him." Kellen stood slowly, staring at the scene before him, a strange mixture of relief and something else entirely settling into his chest. Relief that the explanation seemed to point toward something honorable rather than dangerous or sinister, and something else, something warmer and more complicated, at the thought of a woman choosing to abandon her own important night to save the life of a complete stranger, expecting nothing in return. Where would they have gone from here? He asked, already moving to follow the trail leading away from the scene. Toward the village, most likely, Derek replied, pointing toward a worn path leading east through the trees. It is the closest settlement with proper medical care. Kellen nodded, a new determination settling over him as he began walking in that direction, his mind already racing ahead to the moment he would finally meet the woman whose absence had consumed his thoughts since the previous evening. He had no idea what he expected to find, no clear plan for what he would say or do once he located her, only a growing certainty that this meeting, whenever it happened, would prove far more significant than any ceremony could have been. Elena woke late the next morning, her body still sore from the previous night's exertion, sunlight streaming through her window in warm golden bars. For a moment, lying there in the quiet comfort of her own bed, she almost believed the entire ordeal had been a strange, vivid dream. Then she noticed the faint scratches along her arms, the lingering ache in her shoulders from hours spent crouched over an injured stranger, and reality settled back into place. She dressed quickly, choosing simple, practical clothing this time, nothing like the elaborate dress from the previous evening. Her mother greeted her downstairs with a mixture of relief and confusion, having heard only fragments of what happened from a neighbor who spotted Elena walking home well after dark. "Where were you all night?" her mother asked, concern etched across her tired face. "Everyone is talking about the ceremony, about how you never arrived. Do you understand what this means, Elena?" "I understand," Elena said gently, taking her mother's hands in her own. "I found someone hurt in the forest. I could not leave him there to help himself. You would have done the same thing." Her mother's expression softened slightly, though worry still lingered in her eyes. "Of course I would have. But Elena, the Alpha King himself was there. This was not just any ceremony." "I know who was there," Elena replied, keeping her voice steady, despite the small flutter of nervousness the reminder caused in her chest. "But a life mattered more than an opportunity, Mother. I do not regret my choice, and I hope you can understand that eventually, even if you cannot right now." Her mother sighed, pulling her into a brief, tight embrace. "I understand more than you think, child. I simply worry about what consequences might follow such a public absence. These things are not always forgiven easily." Elena spent the remainder of the morning helping around the house, trying to settle back into normal routine, despite the strange, unsettled feeling that had followed her since the previous night. She found herself thinking often about Colin, wondering how his recovery was progressing, wondering whether she should return to check on him, or whether that might seem improper given how little she actually knew about him. By midday, she decided to visit the village again, telling herself it was purely for professional reasons, to ensure her patient was healing properly, and that Hazel had everything needed for his continued care. The walk felt shorter this time, familiar now after the previous day's journey, though her mind remained occupied with questions she could not quite answer about the mysterious stranger she had saved. She arrived at the small house to find unexpected commotion. Several unfamiliar men gathered outside, their bearing and clothing marking them clearly as something beyond ordinary travelers. Elena hesitated at the edge of the small clearing, uncertain whether to approach, when Hazel spotted her and waved her forward with obvious relief. "Elena, thank goodness you have come. There has been quite a development this morning." "What kind of development?" Elena asked, glancing warily at the armed men standing near the doorway. Before Hazel could answer, the door opened, and Colin emerged, moving slowly, with the help of a crude crutch, his face brightening with genuine relief the moment he spotted her. "Elena," he said warmly, "I was hoping you would return today." "Of course I would return. I need to check on your recovery." She studied the men gathered around him with growing confusion. "Colin, who are these people?" A brief flicker of something like guilt crossed his face before he answered. "Elena, there is something I should have told you last night, something I was not entirely honest about." Her stomach tightened with a sudden, uncomfortable premonition. "What do you mean?" "My name is not simply Colin the Traveler," he said carefully, watching her reaction closely. "I serve as a scout for Alpha King Kellen. I was traveling ahead of the ceremony to survey the roads for safety when I was attacked and injured." Elena felt the ground shift beneath her, understanding beginning to dawn even before he finished speaking. "You work for the king," she repeated slowly. "The very man whose ceremony I missed to save your life." "Yes," Colin admitted, something apologetic in his tone. "I did not tell you sooner, because I was not certain I could trust anyone, even someone helping me. But Elena, please understand, my gratitude toward you is genuine, regardless of my position. You saved my life without knowing anything about my rank or my usefulness to you. That kind of selflessness is rare." Before Elena could fully process this revelation, one of the men standing near the doorway stepped forward, his expression serious and focused. "Are you the healer known as Elena, from the pack residing near the Eastern Hills?" "Yes," Elena answered cautiously. "Why do you ask?" "The Alpha King has been searching for you since yesterday evening. He wishes to speak with you personally regarding the events of last night." Elena's heart began pounding rapidly, a mixture of anxiety and disbelief flooding through her. "The Alpha King wants to speak with me? Why would someone of his standing take personal interest in this matter?" "I cannot speak for his reasoning," the man replied evenly. "Only that he has instructed us to locate you and arrange a meeting as soon as possible." Elena glanced toward Colin, silently asking for guidance, uncertain what to make of this unexpected turn. His expression remained warm and reassuring, though a hint of something else, perhaps nervousness on her behalf, flickered behind his eyes. "The king is not an unreasonable man," Colin said gently. "Whatever concerns you might have about this meeting, I do not believe you have anything to fear. If anything, he owes you a debt of gratitude that few people ever earn from him." "That is easy for you to say," Elena replied, managing a small, nervous laugh despite her racing thoughts. "You already know him. I have only heard stories, most of them describing a man known for his temper and his exacting standards." "He can be exactly that," Colin agreed honestly. "But he values honesty and courage above almost everything else. From everything I witnessed of your character last night, you have nothing to worry about on that front." Elena took a steadying breath, trying to calm the rapid rhythm of her heartbeat as she considered the situation before her. Whatever she had expected when she walked toward the village this morning, meeting the powerful Alpha King she had unknowingly snubbed the previous evening, had certainly not been part of her plans. "When does he wish to meet with me?" she finally asked, resigning herself to whatever came next. "He is here now," the man answered simply, gesturing toward the tree line behind him, where several more figures were emerging into the clearing. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she watched a tall, commanding figure step forward from among the group, his presence immediately setting him apart from everyone else gathered there. Even without any formal announcement, she knew instinctively that this was the Alpha King himself, standing before her at last, his sharp gaze already fixed directly on her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken further still. Kellen approached slowly, his eyes never leaving Elena's face as he closed the distance between them. Up close, he was even more imposing than she had imagined, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair, and eyes that seemed to hold both authority and something far more curious than she expected from a man of his reputation. "You must be Elena," he said, his deep voice carrying an unexpected gentleness despite its natural authority. "Yes, Your Majesty," she replied, dropping into a respectful bow despite her racing thoughts. "I apologize for my absence at the ceremony last night. I understand it must have caused considerable inconvenience." Kellen studied her for a long moment before responding, something thoughtful passing across his sharp features. "Inconvenience," he repeated slowly, as though testing the word. "Is that truly how you would describe what happened, healer?" Elena straightened slightly, meeting his gaze with more confidence than she felt internally. "I do not know how else to describe it, Your Majesty. I chose to help an injured man, rather than attend an important gathering. I understand the consequences of that choice." "Do you regret it?" Kellen asked, his tone unreadable, though his eyes seemed to search hers for something specific. Elena glanced briefly toward Colin, still standing nearby with his crutch, alive and recovering, because of the choice she had made. "No," she answered honestly, her voice steady and unwavering. "I do not regret it, Your Majesty. Not even slightly." A long silence stretched between them, and Elena found herself holding her breath, uncertain how the powerful man before her would react to such a direct admission. Then, unexpectedly, something shifted in Kellen's expression, the sternness softening into something closer to genuine respect. "Good," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "Because if you had regretted saving a man's life simply to please me, I would have thought far less of your character than I currently do. Elena blinked in surprise at his response, uncertain how to interpret such an unexpected reaction from a man she had assumed would be furious with her. Your Majesty, I confess I did not expect such understanding from you. Perhaps you assumed things about me based on reputation alone, Kellen said, a faint hint of dry humor entering his tone. I find that people who genuinely understand my character are often surprised by how little the rumors capture accurately. Elena felt herself relaxing slightly, though the intensity of his gaze still made her nerves flutter in ways she could not entirely explain. I will try to remember that, Your Majesty. Around them, the gathered men and Colin watched the exchange with visible interest, though no one interrupted the private moment unfolding between the king and the healer whose selfless choice had brought them all together in this unexpected way. Elena had no idea, standing there in the quiet clearing with the powerful Alpha King studying her with such careful attention, that this brief meeting was only the beginning of something that would change both of their lives entirely. I would like to speak with you further, Kellen said, gesturing toward a fallen log at the edge of the clearing that offered a quiet place to sit away from the gathered crowd. If you are willing, of course. Elena nodded, following him to the makeshift seating, while the others hung back respectfully, giving them space for a private conversation. She could feel curious eyes watching from a distance, but she pushed the awareness aside, focusing instead on the man sitting beside her, waiting patiently for whatever he intended to say. Tell me what happened, Kellen said simply. From the beginning. I want to understand exactly what occurred last night. Elena recounted the events carefully, describing how she heard the scream while walking toward the ceremony, how she found Colin injured and bleeding beneath the old oak tree, how she made the decision to stay and treat him rather than continue on to the gathering. She spoke honestly about her uncertainty, about the moment she realized she would miss the ceremony entirely, and about her decision to prioritize the stranger's life over her own prospects. Kellen listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful throughout her account, occasionally nodding, as though confirming details he had already pieced together from the evidence at the scene. When she finished, he remained quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had shared. You had no idea who he was, Kellen finally said, his tone contemplative. No idea he served me. No idea helping him might carry any particular significance beyond simply saving a life. No, Your Majesty. I only knew someone needed help, and I was capable of providing it. That distinction matters more than you might realize, Kellen said quietly. Many people perform kind acts when they believe there is something to gain from the recognition. You extended help expecting nothing in return, not even knowledge of who you were helping. Elena considered his words carefully before responding. Is that truly so rare, Your Majesty? I would like to believe most people would act the same way given the circumstances. Kellen's expression grew slightly more serious, something like weariness flickering behind his eyes. In my experience, genuine selflessness is far more uncommon than you might hope. Most people calculate advantage even in moments that appear generous on the surface. Your actions last night contained no such calculation. Perhaps you simply surround yourself with the wrong kind of people, Elena said, before she could stop herself, immediately wondering if she had spoken too boldly toward someone of his standing. To her surprise, Kellen laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his stern features into something warmer and more approachable. Perhaps you are correct, healer. It would not be the first time someone has suggested as much. The tension between them eased slightly after that exchange, the conversation flowing more naturally as they continued talking. Kellen asked about her training as a healer, genuinely curious about her skills and her dedication to the craft. Elena found herself sharing more than she initially intended, describing her years of study under the pack's elder healer, her fascination with understanding how the body healed itself, given proper care and attention. You clearly love your work, Kellen observed, watching her expression brighten as she spoke about her craft. I do, Elena admitted. There is something meaningful about helping people heal, about using knowledge and skill to make a genuine difference in someone's life. I cannot imagine choosing any other path. Even when it costs you significant opportunities, such as attending an important ceremony? Kellen asked, though his tone held no accusation, only genuine curiosity. Especially then, Elena replied firmly. What good is opportunity if pursuing it requires abandoning the very values that make the opportunity meaningful in the first place? Kellen studied her with renewed interest at this response. Something calculating, yet appreciative in his gaze. You speak with remarkable clarity about your priorities, healer. Most people your age struggle far more with such decisions. Perhaps I have simply never found the ceremony's promises particularly compelling, Elena said honestly. Being chosen by someone important has never felt as significant to me as being able to help those who genuinely need it. A brief silence fell between them as Kellen absorbed her words, something shifting subtly in the way he regarded her, a deeper curiosity emerging beneath his initial fascination with her unusual choice. Elena felt suddenly self-conscious under his continued attention, uncertain what conclusions he might be drawing about her character, based on their brief exchange. I should return to check on my patient, she said finally, gesturing toward where Colin remained resting near the small house. His recovery still requires careful monitoring. Of course, Kellen said, rising alongside her with unexpected courtesy. I do not wish to keep you from your important work any longer than necessary. As they walked back toward the gathered group, Kellen spoke again, his voice quieter now, meant only for her ears. Elena, I want you to know that despite the confusion and inconvenience caused by your absence last night, I bear you no ill will whatsoever. If anything, I find myself deeply impressed by your character and your commitment to your principles. Elena felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words, an unexpected pride at earning such genuine praise from a man whose reputation suggested he rarely offered such sentiments freely. Thank you, Your Majesty. That means more to me than you probably realize. Perhaps, Kellen said, a faint smile touching his lips, we will have opportunity to speak further in the future. I find myself curious to learn more about a woman capable of prioritizing genuine values over convenient opportunity. Elena felt her cheeks warm slightly at the implication behind his words, though she kept her expression composed despite the fluttering sensation in her chest. I would welcome that opportunity, Your Majesty, whenever it might arise. As Kellen and his party eventually departed the village clearing, leaving Elena standing there with Colin and Hazel, she found herself replaying every detail of the conversation in her mind, trying to understand exactly what had just transpired between herself and one of the most powerful men in the entire region. That went considerably better than I expected, Colin remarked, once the group had disappeared beyond the tree line, a knowing smile playing at his lips. What do you mean? Elena asked, still somewhat dazed by the entire encounter. I have served under Alpha King Kellen for several years now, Colin explained. I have rarely seen him speak with anyone, the way he spoke with you just now, healer. Whatever impression you made on him runs deeper than mere gratitude for saving my life. Elena shook her head, dismissing the suggestion, even as a small, curious flutter stirred somewhere beneath her uncertainty. You are reading too much into a simple conversation, Colin. He was merely being courteous, given the circumstances. Perhaps, Colin said, though his knowing expression suggested he believed otherwise. Time will tell, I suppose. That evening, as Elena finally returned home and settled into the familiar comfort of her own bed, she found sleep elusive despite her exhaustion, her mind repeatedly drifting back to the intensity of Kellen's gaze, the unexpected warmth in his laughter, the genuine curiosity he had shown toward her thoughts and values. She told herself firmly that such thoughts were foolish, that a man of his standing likely showed similar curiosity toward many people he encountered, that reading too much significance into a single afternoon conversation would only lead to disappointment. Yet despite her best efforts at practical reasoning, she could not entirely shake the feeling that something significant had shifted that day, that the missed ceremony, which had initially seemed like the end of one particular opportunity, might actually represent the beginning of something else entirely, something she could not yet fully understand or anticipate. Word of the Alpha King's personal visit to the small village spread quickly through the surrounding region, carried by travelers and traders who could not resist sharing such a remarkable story. By the time Elena returned to her own Pax territory 2 days later, whispers had already begun circulating about the healer who missed the ceremony to save a stranger, only to receive a personal audience with Kellen himself as a result. Her mother greeted the news with a complicated mixture of relief and renewed anxiety. The Alpha King visited you personally, she repeated, still struggling to fully process the information. Elena, this changes everything. Do you understand what this means? It does not necessarily mean anything, Mother, Elena replied, though even she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. He simply wished to understand the circumstances of my absence. That is all that happened. That is rarely all that happens when someone of his standing takes personal interest in a situation, her mother said knowingly. Men like him do not typically bother themselves with minor matters, unless something has captured their genuine attention. Elena tried to dismiss her mother's speculation, focusing instead on returning to her normal routine, tending to patients within her own pack, continuing her studies under the guidance of the elder healer, attempting to push aside the persistent thoughts of dark eyes, and a laugh that had surprised her with its warmth. Yet no matter how determinedly she buried herself in familiar work, she found her mind drifting back to that afternoon conversation, more often than she wished to admit. Nearly a week passed before anything further occurred, enough time that Elena had almost convinced herself the entire encounter had been an isolated event, unlikely to repeat itself, given the vast difference in status between herself and the powerful Alpha King. Then, on a quiet afternoon, while she worked in the small building her pack used for treating illness and injury, a messenger arrived bearing an unmistakable seal that immediately drew attention from everyone present. A letter for the healer Elena, the messenger announced, presenting a carefully sealed envelope with obvious formality. From Alpha King Kellen personally. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the letter, aware of the curious eyes of her fellow pack members watching the exchange with undisguised interest. She retreated to a private corner of the building before breaking the seal, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness she could not fully explain. The letter was written in careful, elegant script, the words themselves more personal and warm than Elena had anticipated given the formal nature of royal correspondence. Healer Elena, the letter began. I find that our brief conversation several days ago has remained with me more persistently than I initially expected. Your perspective on duty and genuine values struck me as both refreshing and rare among those I typically encounter in my position. I would welcome the opportunity to continue our discussion, should you be willing. There is a gathering at my estate in 10 days' time, a much smaller and less formal occasion than the ceremony you previously missed. I would be honored if you would consider attending, not as a candidate seeking my attention through tradition, but simply as someone whose company and perspective I have genuinely come to value. Whatever your decision, please know that my respect for your character remains unchanged regardless of your answer. Signed, Kellen. Elena read the letter twice, her heart racing with each pass through the careful, deliberate words. The invitation felt entirely different from the formal, tradition-bound ceremony she had missed previously. This felt personal, genuine, an actual expression of interest rather than an obligation, rooted in ancient custom. She spent the remainder of the day distracted, replaying the letter's contents repeatedly in her mind, uncertain how to respond to such an unexpected and significant invitation. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, curious to explore whatever connection had begun forming between herself and the powerful king. Another part of her, worried about the complications such an arrangement might introduce into her simple, familiar life as a village healer. That evening, she sought counsel from Hazel, the village healer who had helped treat Colin and who had witnessed firsthand the beginning of this unusual situation. Hazel listened carefully as Elena explained the contents of the letter, her expression thoughtful throughout the recounting. "What does your heart tell you, child?" Hazel finally asked, once Elena finished speaking. "My heart is not entirely reliable in matters like this," Elena admitted honestly. "I barely know the man beyond a single afternoon conversation. How can I trust feelings that have developed so quickly?" "Feelings do not always require extensive time to develop genuinely," Hazel replied gently. "Sometimes a single meaningful conversation reveals more about compatibility than months of superficial interaction ever could. The question is not whether your feelings are premature, but whether they are honest." Elena considered this for a long moment, thinking back to the ease of their conversation, the genuine curiosity Kellen had shown toward her thoughts and values, the warmth that had emerged from beneath his initially stern demeanor. "I do believe my feelings are honest," she finally admitted. "I simply worry about what accepting this invitation might mean for my future, for my work as a healer." "Perhaps," Hazel suggested, "you are overthinking a simple decision. Accept the invitation, attend the gathering, see what develops naturally between you, without forcing expectations onto a situation that has not yet had proper opportunity to unfold. You can always decline further involvement later if it does not feel right." Elena found comfort in Hazel's practical wisdom, and by the following morning, she had composed her response, carefully worded but ultimately affirmative. She would attend the gathering at Kellen's estate, curious to explore whatever connection had begun forming between them, while remaining grounded in her own values and priorities, regardless of how the situation developed. The 10 days leading up to the gathering passed with agonizing slowness, Elena finding herself simultaneously anticipating and dreading the approaching date. She continued her work as a healer throughout this period, treating patients within her pack with her usual dedication, though her mind frequently wandered toward thoughts of the upcoming meeting and everything it might represent for her future. She also made several additional visits to check on Colin's continued recovery, finding him increasingly mobile and cheerful as his injuries healed properly under Hazel's continued care. Their friendship deepened during these visits, Colin proving to be an engaging and thoughtful companion who offered valuable insight into Kellen's character, based on years of loyal service. "He is not an easy man to know," Colin explained during one such visit, sitting comfortably now without need for his crutch, though his legs still required careful movement. "He carries tremendous responsibility, and that weight has made him guarded with most people. But those he genuinely trusts see a different side of him entirely, someone thoughtful and surprisingly gentle, beneath the stern exterior he presents to the world." "How do you know he was genuine with me, and not simply performing courtesy given the unusual circumstances?" Elena asked, still uncertain despite her growing anticipation for the upcoming gathering. "Because I have never seen him personally travel to locate someone over a missed ceremony," Colin replied honestly. "He could have simply sent representatives, could have dismissed the entire matter as inconsequential once he learned the reasonable explanation for your absence. Instead, he came himself, spoke with you personally, and has now invited you to a private gathering, unlike anything typically extended to someone outside his immediate circle. These are not the actions of a man performing empty courtesy, Elena." Elena absorbed his words carefully, feeling her anticipation for the upcoming gathering grow alongside a cautious hope she had not expected to develop so quickly, regarding a man she barely knew. Whatever awaited her at Kellen's estate, she resolved to approach the situation with honesty and openness, allowing whatever connection existed between them to develop naturally, without forcing expectations that might ultimately prove disappointing. As the day of the gathering finally arrived, Elena dressed carefully in a simple but elegant dress her mother had helped prepare, nothing as elaborate as the ruined gown from the missed ceremony, but tasteful and appropriate for the occasion nonetheless. Standing before her mirror, studying her reflection with a mixture of nervousness and determination, she felt a strange sense of destiny settling over her, a certainty that whatever happened at Kellen's estate would prove significant regardless of the eventual outcome. The journey to his territory took most of the day, arranged transportation, provided courtesy of the king himself, a gesture that touched Elena more than she expected, given the practical thoughtfulness it represented. As the carriage finally approached the impressive estate that served as Kellen's primary residence, Elena felt her heart racing with anticipation, uncertain what exactly awaited her within those grand walls, but eager nonetheless to discover whatever future might be unfolding before her. The estate proved even grander than Elena had imagined, stone walls rising several stories high, surrounded by carefully maintained gardens that spoke of both wealth and refined taste. As her carriage came to a stop before the main entrance, a member of the household staff hurried forward to assist her, guiding her through impressive corridors toward a smaller, more intimate courtyard, where the promised gathering was already underway. Unlike the crowded formality of the mating ceremony, this gathering felt notably more relaxed, perhaps 24 guests scattered throughout the courtyard, engaged in quiet conversation over refreshments arranged on elegant tables. Elena scanned the crowd nervously, searching for a familiar face, until Kellen himself appeared from among the guests, his expression brightening genuinely at the sight of her. "Elena," he said warmly, approaching with unmistakable pleasure evident in his voice. "I am glad you decided to come." "Thank you for the invitation, Your Majesty," she replied, offering a respectful curtsy despite the more casual atmosphere surrounding them. "Please," Kellen said, a faint smile touching his lips. "In this setting, simply Kellen will suffice. I find myself hoping we might move beyond such formal titles, given the circumstances of our acquaintance." Elena felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words, a small thrill of pleasure at being invited into such informal familiarity with someone of his standing. "Very well, Kellen, though I confess it feels strange addressing you so casually." "You will grow accustomed to it, I imagine," he said, offering his arm as he guided her further into the courtyard, introducing her to several of the gathered guests as they moved through the crowd. The evening unfolded pleasantly, filled with genuine conversation, rather than the stiff, calculated exchanges Elena had anticipated from such a gathering. Kellen remained attentive throughout, frequently returning to her side between obligatory conversations with other guests, his genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions evident in every exchange between them. "Tell me more about your work," he requested at one point, as they walked slowly along a garden path, lit by soft lantern light, somewhat removed from the main gathering. "I find myself curious about the specific challenges you encounter as a healer." Elena shared several stories from her practice, describing complicated cases she had successfully treated, difficult diagnoses that had required creative thinking beyond standard training. Kellen listened with genuine fascination, asking thoughtful follow-up questions that revealed a sharper intellect than his reputation as merely a formidable warrior and leader might suggest. "You clearly possess remarkable skill," he observed, once she finished describing a particularly challenging case, involving a complicated fever that had initially resisted conventional treatment. "I imagine your pack considers themselves fortunate to have access to such dedicated care." "I hope so," Elena replied modestly, "though I sometimes wonder if my skills might serve a greater purpose in a larger territory, where more people might benefit from proper medical knowledge." Something flickered behind Kellen's eyes at this comment, an idea forming that he did not immediately voice. "That is an interesting consideration," he said instead, filing the thought away for later contemplation. As the evening progressed, and the gathered guests began departing in small groups, Kellen guided Elena toward a quiet balcony, overlooking the extensive gardens below, the moon casting silver light across the carefully manicured landscape. They stood together in comfortable silence for several moments, simply enjoying the peaceful view before Kellen finally spoke. "I must confess something to you, Elena," he said, his voice quieter now, more serious than the light-hearted tone that had characterized much of their earlier conversation. "Since our first meeting in that village clearing, I have found myself thinking about you far more frequently than I anticipated." Elena's heart quickened at this admission, though she tried to maintain a composed exterior, despite the flutter of excitement building within her chest. "I confess similar thoughts have occupied my own mind these past days," she admitted honestly. "I did not expect to find such genuine connection so unexpectedly," Kellen continued, turning to face her fully now, his expression open and sincere, in a way she had not witnessed from him before. "You possess a clarity of values and character that I have rarely encountered among those who typically seek my attention through more traditional means. Perhaps that is precisely why our connection feels genuine," Elena suggested softly. "Neither of us approached this situation seeking anything beyond honest acquaintance." Kellen nodded slowly, something thoughtful crossing his features as he considered her words. "I would like to continue exploring this connection further, if you are willing. Not through the rigid traditions of formal courtship, but simply through honest time spent together, allowing whatever exists between us to develop naturally." Elena felt a warm certainty settling over her at his words, a recognition that this unexpected path, however unconventional compared to the ceremony she had originally missed, felt considerably more authentic than anything the traditional gathering might have offered. "I would like that very much, Kellen." Their eyes met in the soft moonlight, something unspoken passing between them, a mutual acknowledgement of the growing connection neither had anticipated finding so quickly, yet neither wished to deny now that it had clearly taken root. Kellen reached out, gently taking her hand in his own, his touch warm and reassuring. "Then let us discover together where this path leads," he said quietly, without the pressure of tradition or expectation, simply following honest curiosity and genuine connection. Elena smiled, feeling lighter and more hopeful than she had, in longer than she could remember. "I would like nothing more." They remained on the balcony for a while longer, continuing their conversation, as the moon climbed higher above the peaceful gardens, discussing everything from their childhood memories to their hopes for the future, discovering countless small compatibilities that only deepened the connection already forming between them. By the time Elena finally departed the estate that evening, Returning home in the same comfortable carriage that had brought her, she carried with her a certainty that her missed ceremony, rather than representing a lost opportunity, had actually opened a door towards something far more meaningful than she had ever anticipated. Yet even as this certainty settled warmly within her chest, Elena remained unaware of the challenges that awaited on the path ahead, unaware that her unexpected connection with the powerful Alpha King had already begun attracting attention from those within his circle, who viewed her sudden prominence with considerably less enthusiasm than Kellen himself displayed. Over the following weeks, Elena and Kellen continued meeting regularly, their connection deepening steadily through honest conversation and shared experiences that felt increasingly natural, despite the significant difference in their respective positions. Kellen made a point of visiting her pack's territory whenever his responsibilities allowed, often bringing small gifts related to her healing practice, rare herbs or specialized instruments he had sought out specifically because he remembered her mentioning their usefulness during previous conversations. Elena, in turn, found herself looking forward to these visits with an eagerness she had never experienced before, her heart lifting whenever she spotted his familiar figure approaching along the path leading to her pack's territory. Their relationship developed at a comfortable pace, neither rushing toward premature declarations, nor holding back the genuine affection that continued growing between them with each passing encounter. However, not everyone within Kellen's inner circle viewed this developing relationship with the same enthusiasm. Vivian, the ambitious candidate who had presented herself at the original ceremony with obvious eagerness to secure Kellen's attention, found herself increasingly frustrated as word spread throughout the region about the king's growing attachment to a simple village healer, rather than any of the noble candidates who had properly attended the traditional gathering. "This is absurd," Vivian complained to her close friend Ivy, another disappointed candidate from the ceremony, as they sat together in Vivian's family estate, discussing the unwelcome development. A healer from some minor pack who could not even be bothered to attend the ceremony properly has somehow captured the king's attention, while those of us who followed proper tradition remain overlooked entirely. Perhaps her selfless act genuinely impressed him, Ivy suggested carefully, though her tone made clear she shared Vivian's frustration regardless. Selfless act, Vivian scoffed dismissively. More likely calculated manipulation, pretending indifference to secure exactly the attention she claims to have never sought. I refuse to believe anyone genuinely prioritizes some random stranger over an opportunity to secure the king's favor. "What do you propose we do about it?" Ivy asked, genuine curiosity mixing with her own simmering resentment toward the unexpected turn of events. Vivian's expression turned calculating, ambition sharpening her features into something colder and more determined. "We need to remind the king exactly what proper qualifications look like, and perhaps ensure this healer understands she does not belong in circles far beyond her modest upbringing." Over the following days, Vivian began carefully orchestrating a campaign designed to undermine Elena's growing standing, spreading subtle rumors questioning her true motivations, suggesting that her selfless reputation was merely a carefully constructed performance designed to secure exactly the kind of royal attention she now enjoyed. These whispers began circulating through various social circles connected to Kellen's court, gradually building momentum despite lacking any genuine evidence to support such claims. Elena remained largely unaware of these developing schemes for several weeks, focused instead on both her continued work as a healer and her deepening relationship with Kellen. However, during one of her visits to his estate, she began noticing subtle changes in how certain individuals treated her. Cooler receptions from some of the nobility who had previously seemed cordial enough, whispered conversations that abruptly stopped whenever she approached certain groups. "Is something troubling you?" Kellen asked one afternoon, noticing her unusual quietness during what should have been a pleasant walk through his estate's gardens. Elena hesitated before answering, uncertain whether voicing her concerns might seem petty or insecure, given the genuine strength of their growing connection. "I have noticed certain people treating me differently lately," she finally admitted. "Nothing overtly hostile, simply subtle coldness that feels different from before." Kellen's expression grew serious at this admission, concern immediately evident in his features. "Tell me exactly what you have observed." Elena described the changes she had noticed, the whispered conversations, the cooler receptions, small comments that seemed innocuous, individually, but suggested a pattern of growing resentment when considered together. Kellen listened intently, his jaw tightening slightly as he processed her observations. "I suspect I know the source of this behavior," he said finally, though he did not immediately elaborate further. "Please understand, Elena, that whatever rumors or resentment you might encounter, none of it reflects any legitimate concern about your character or your place within my life. Jealousy and disappointed ambition often manifest in petty ways among those unaccustomed to seeing their expectations unfulfilled. I do not wish to cause difficulty for you," Elena said honestly, genuine worry evident in her voice. "If my presence creates problems within your court, perhaps we should reconsider how we proceed." "Absolutely not," Kellen replied firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I refuse to allow petty jealousy to dictate decisions about my own life and happiness. Whatever challenges arise from this situation, we will face them together, Elena. I have no intention of allowing baseless resentment to undermine something I genuinely value." Despite his reassurance, the whispered rumors continued circulating, gradually growing bolder as Vivian's carefully orchestrated campaign gained momentum among certain factions within the region's noble circles. Some began openly questioning whether a simple village healer truly belonged in such elevated company, suggesting that her humble background made her fundamentally unsuited for the responsibilities that might eventually accompany a serious relationship with the Alpha King. Elena found herself increasingly troubled by these developments, though she tried to maintain her characteristic composure whenever encountering such attitudes directly. During one particularly uncomfortable encounter at a social gathering Kellen had invited her to attend, Vivian herself approached with a falsely sweet smile that barely concealed the calculated malice beneath. "Elena," Vivian said, her tone dripping with condescension despite its superficial politeness, "how fortunate you have been, capturing such attention despite your rather ordinary background. I imagine it must feel overwhelming, suddenly finding yourself among circles so far removed from your usual company." Elena met her gaze steadily, refusing to let the deliberate provocation shake her composure. "I have found the transition manageable enough, thank you for your concern. Though I confess I have never placed particular value on the kind of company someone keeps, preferring instead to focus on genuine character rather than superficial status." Vivian's smile tightened slightly at this response, clearly not the reaction she had anticipated. "How admirably principled of you, though I do wonder whether such principles will withstand the genuine pressures of court life, once the initial novelty of your presence fades and people begin asking harder questions about your true suitability for such elevated company." "I appreciate your concern for my well-being," Elena replied evenly, keeping her tone polite despite recognizing the thinly veiled hostility beneath Vivian's words. "Though I assure you, I have faced considerably more challenging circumstances than court gossip during my years as a healer. I do not intend to abandon my principles simply because certain individuals find my presence inconvenient to their own ambitions." Something flashed briefly in Vivian's eyes at this pointed response, confirming that Elena's suspicion about the source of the whispered rumors had been entirely correct. Before the conversation could escalate further, Kellen appeared beside them, his expression cooling noticeably as he observed the tense exchange between the two women. "Vivian," he said, his tone carrying unmistakable authority, "I trust you are treating my guest with appropriate courtesy." "Of course, Your Majesty," Vivian replied quickly, her demeanor shifting immediately under his pointed attention. "We were simply enjoying pleasant conversation." "I am glad to hear it," Kellen said, though his tone made clear he saw through the false pleasantness far more clearly than Vivian likely hoped. "I would hate to think anyone within my court felt inclined toward behavior unbecoming of proper hospitality." As Vivian retreated with visible discomfort, Kellen turned his attention back to Elena, concern evident in his expression. "I apologize for that encounter. I should have anticipated her behavior and remained closer throughout this gathering." "There is no need to apologize," Elena reassured him, though she appreciated his protective instincts nonetheless. "I am capable of handling petty provocations, Kellen. Though I confess, I would appreciate understanding exactly what motivates such determined hostility." Kellen sighed, running a hand through his dark hair as he considered how best to explain the situation. "Vivian was among the candidates most eager to secure my attention during the original ceremony. I suspect your unexpected presence in my life has disrupted ambitions she held quite seriously regarding her own future. I see, Elena said thoughtfully, pieces beginning to fall into place regarding the source of the growing tension surrounding her presence within Kellen's circle. And you believe she is responsible for the rumors that have been circulating? I have little doubt of it, Kellen confirmed grimly, though proving such accusations definitively remains challenging without more concrete evidence than mere suspicion. Elena nodded, understanding the delicate political situation Kellen navigated regarding accusations against a member of a prominent noble family. Perhaps time and continued honest conduct will prove more effective than direct confrontation, she suggested. If I simply continue behaving with integrity, eventually even skeptical observers might recognize the baseless nature of such rumors. Kellen studied her with evident admiration at this pragmatic approach. Your patience and wisdom continue to impress me, Elena. Though I confess, I worry about the toll such ongoing hostility might take on you personally, regardless of your admirable composure. I appreciate your concern, Elena said gently, reaching out to briefly touch his arm in reassurance. But I have faced difficult circumstances before and emerged stronger for the experience. Whatever challenges Vivian and her allies attempt to create, I do not intend to abandon what we have built together simply because certain individuals feel threatened by genuine happiness they cannot claim for themselves. Despite her brave words, Elena could not entirely shake a lingering unease as she departed the gathering that evening, aware that the whispered rumors and growing resentment represented only the beginning of challenges she would likely face as her connection with Kellen continued deepening. She had no way of knowing, walking away from the estate that night, just how far Vivian's determined ambition might eventually drive her, or what dangerous lengths jealousy and disappointed expectation might ultimately inspire among those unwilling to accept her presence within Kellen's life gracefully. Several weeks passed following the uncomfortable confrontation at the gathering, and Elena continued her regular routine, dividing her time between healing duties within her own pack and increasingly frequent visits to Kellen's estate. Their relationship had grown steadily more serious during this period, both of them acknowledging openly now that what existed between them extended far beyond simple friendship or curious acquaintance. Yet the underlying tension created by Vivian's determined campaign against her had not disappeared, merely shifted into quieter, more calculated forms of interference that proved increasingly difficult to address directly. Elena began noticing small, troubling incidents that seemed too deliberate to dismiss as mere coincidence. Supplies mysteriously going missing from the small healing station she used during her visits to Kellen's territory. Appointments somehow becoming double-booked despite careful scheduling. Minor inconveniences that individually meant little but collectively suggested organized sabotage. The most serious incident occurred during a visit when Elena had been asked to help treat several members of Kellen's household staff, suffering from a sudden outbreak of illness. She arrived at the designated treatment area to find her prepared medicines somehow contaminated, rendering them useless for the intended purpose, forcing her to scramble for alternative solutions while several patients waited anxiously for proper care. This cannot be accidental, Elena said grimly to Colin, who had accompanied her that day, fully recovered now from his earlier injuries and serving once again in his role as a trusted scout within Kellen's service. Someone deliberately tampered with these supplies. I agree, Colin said, examining the contaminated medicines with a frown. This level of interference goes beyond simple gossip or social exclusion. Someone is actively trying to undermine your ability to perform your work properly. Vivian, Elena said with quiet certainty, though she had no direct proof connecting the noblewoman to this specific incident. Perhaps, Colin agreed cautiously, though we should be careful about direct accusations without concrete evidence. Vivian is not without allies or influence within certain circles, and unsubstantiated claims could create additional complications for both you and Kellen. Elena nodded, understanding the wisdom in his caution, even as frustration built within her chest at the ongoing interference she could not directly confront. She managed to salvage the situation by quickly preparing alternative remedies using herbs she had brought from her own supplies, ensuring the affected household members received proper treatment despite the sabotage attempt. However, the incident left her rattled, aware that whoever orchestrated these interferences seemed determined to escalate their tactics beyond mere social exclusion. When she informed Kellen of the incident that evening, His reaction proved considerably more intense than his previous responses to the whispered rumors and cold receptions Elena had endured. His expression darkened with genuine anger as she described the contaminated supplies, the potential danger to the affected patients had she not managed to salvage the situation quickly. "This has gone far beyond acceptable behavior," he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Petty jealousy expressed through gossip is one matter. Deliberately endangering the health of my household staff to undermine you represents something far more serious. I have no direct proof of who is responsible," Elena cautioned, echoing Colin's earlier warning about premature accusations. "Perhaps not concrete proof," Kellen agreed, "but I intend to investigate this matter thoroughly. Whoever is responsible for this escalation will face serious consequences once their involvement is properly confirmed." True to his word, Kellen initiated a discreet investigation into the incident, assigning trusted members of his household staff to monitor activities around the treatment areas Elena used during her visits, hoping to catch whoever was responsible for the ongoing sabotage in the act. For several days, nothing suspicious occurred, the investigation yielding little concrete evidence, despite careful observation. Then, during Elena's next scheduled visit, a more dramatic incident occurred that finally provided the evidence needed to confirm suspicions that had been building for weeks. Elena had been asked to help treat a young child from a visiting family who had fallen seriously ill during their stay at the estate, a situation requiring careful, precise medical intervention, given the severity of the child's symptoms. As Elena prepared the necessary treatment, one of the household staff members assigned to monitor the situation noticed a figure lurking suspiciously near the storage area where Elena's medical supplies were kept, apparently attempting to interfere with the prepared remedies before Elena could administer them to her young patient. The staff member immediately alerted nearby guards, who intercepted the individual before any damage could be done. To everyone's shock, though perhaps not entirely surprising given the ongoing suspicions, the individual caught attempting the sabotage turned out to be a servant, employed directly within Vivian's household, someone who had been secretly instructed to disrupt Elena's work whenever opportunity presented itself. When confronted, the servant, clearly frightened and unwilling to accept sole responsibility for actions taken under explicit instruction, quickly revealed the full extent of Vivian's involvement in orchestrating the ongoing campaign against Elena. The servant explained how Vivian had specifically instructed various forms of interference, from spreading damaging rumors to actively sabotaging Elena's professional supplies, all motivated by bitter resentment over losing Kellen's attention to someone Vivian considered fundamentally unworthy of such prominence. News of this revelation spread quickly through Kellen's court, and the reaction proved swift and decisive. Kellen, furious at learning the true extent of the danger Vivian's actions had posed to both Elena and innocent patients who might have suffered from the sabotaged supplies, summoned Vivian personally to answer for her actions before witnesses gathered within his formal audience chamber. Vivian arrived with visible nervousness beneath her attempts at composed dignity, clearly aware that the situation had escalated far beyond anything she could easily deny or explain away given the servant's detailed confession. "You stand accused of orchestrating deliberate sabotage against Elena's medical practice, actions that potentially endangered the health and safety of individuals under my protection," Kellen announced, his voice carrying cold authority that silenced any remaining doubt among the gathered witnesses. "Do you deny these accusations?" Vivian's composure finally cracked under the weight of undeniable evidence and Kellen's obvious fury. "Your Majesty, I never intended for anyone to be seriously harmed. I simply wish to demonstrate that this healer does not truly belong within circles reserved for those of proper standing and breeding." "Your jealousy nearly caused genuine harm to an innocent child," Kellen replied sharply, his tone leaving no room for the excuse Vivian had attempted to offer. "Regardless of your feelings about Elena's suitability for my attention, endangering innocent lives to satisfy petty resentment represents behavior I cannot tolerate within my territory." Vivian's family, mortified by the public revelation of her actions, quickly offered profuse apologies on her behalf, promising appropriate consequences and restitution for the damage caused. Kellen, though still visibly angry, ultimately decided against the harshest possible punishments, recognizing that permanently damaging relations with an otherwise valuable noble family would create additional political complications beyond what the situation already warranted. Instead, He decreed that Vivian would be banished from his court for a significant period, required to make formal public apology for her actions, and permanently barred from any future gatherings or ceremonies within his territory. The punishment, while not as severe as some witnesses expected given the seriousness of her actions, sent a clear message throughout the region that such calculated cruelty would not be tolerated, regardless of the perpetrator's noble standing. As the formal proceedings concluded and the gathered witnesses began dispersing, Kellen turned his attention to Elena, who had remained quietly composed throughout the entire confrontation, though relief was evident in her expression now that the truth had finally been revealed and properly addressed. "I am deeply sorry you had to endure such treatment," he said, genuine remorse evident in his voice as he took her hands in his own. "I should have recognized and addressed this situation more quickly, before it escalated to the point of genuine danger." "You could not have known the extent of her involvement without proper evidence," Elena reassured him gently, "and ultimately, justice was served appropriately once the truth became clear. I do not hold you responsible for another person's calculated cruelty." Kellen studied her with renewed admiration, struck once again by her remarkable capacity for grace and understanding, even in the aftermath of such deliberate mistreatment. "Your patience and forgiveness continue to amaze me, Elena. Most people would harbor far more resentment, given everything you have endured these past weeks." "Resentment serves little useful purpose," Elena replied simply. "I would rather focus my energy on continuing my work and strengthening what we have built together, than dwelling on the jealousy of someone who ultimately gained nothing from her actions, beyond public embarrassment and banishment." As they stood together in the now empty audience chamber, the weight of the recent crisis finally lifting from their shoulders, Kellen felt a renewed certainty settling over him regarding the woman standing before him, someone whose character had been tested repeatedly throughout their unusual courtship, yet who had consistently demonstrated integrity, wisdom, and remarkable grace under pressure that few people could match. "Elena," he said softly, his expression growing serious, as an idea that had been forming for some time finally crystallized into definite intention, "I believe the time has come for me to make my feelings toward you entirely clear, without any further hesitation or ambiguity." Elena's heart quickened at the sincerity evident in his voice, sensing that whatever he intended to say next would prove significant beyond anything they had previously discussed during their developing relationship. "I am listening, Kellen." He took a steadying breath, his gaze never leaving hers, as he prepared to voice sentiments that had been building steadily since that first unexpected meeting in the quiet forest clearing so many weeks ago. "Elena, from the very first moment I learned of your absence from the ceremony, before I even knew your name properly, something about the choice you made captured my attention in a way I could not fully explain at the time. I have since come to understand that what drew me toward you was never simple curiosity about an unusual act of defiance. It was recognition of a character rare enough that I knew, even then, I needed to understand it more fully." Elena remained quiet, allowing him to continue, sensing the importance of these words and wanting to give him space to express them fully. "Since that day, every conversation we have shared, every challenge we have faced together, including the recent difficulty caused by Vivian's jealousy, has only strengthened my certainty that what exists between us is genuine and worth pursuing seriously. I do not wish to continue this relationship through casual visits and uncertain intentions any longer, Elena. I wish to formally acknowledge you as someone significant within my life, someone I intend to build a lasting future alongside." Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes at the sincerity and depth of his declaration, emotions she had been carefully guarding throughout their developing relationship, finally breaking free under the weight of his genuine devotion. "Kellen, I have felt similarly for longer than I initially admitted even to myself. I was hesitant to voice such feelings too quickly, worried about moving too fast given the significant differences in our respective positions and responsibilities. Those differences matter far less to me than the genuine connection we share," Kellen replied firmly. "I have witnessed your character tested repeatedly throughout recent weeks, and each time, you have responded with integrity, wisdom, and grace that few people, regardless of their birth or status, could ever hope to match. I do not seek a partner defined by proper noble breeding or traditional qualifications. I seek someone whose values align genuinely with my own, someone capable of navigating difficult circumstances without compromising their fundamental integrity. Elena reached up, gently touching his face, marveling at how far they had traveled together since that first uncertain meeting in the forest clearing. Then let us move forward together, Kellen, without hesitation or uncertainty, clouding what we both genuinely feel. Their relationship, now formally acknowledged and openly celebrated within Kellen's court, continued flourishing over the following weeks. Word spread throughout the region about the genuine devotion between the Alpha King and the humble healer who had once sacrificed a significant opportunity to save a stranger's life, the story taking on an almost legendary quality as it circulated among various packs and territories. However, even as their relationship grew stronger and more secure, new challenges emerged that tested their commitment in different ways. As formal acknowledgement of their relationship became public knowledge, certain political complications arose that Kellen had not fully anticipated when he first decided to pursue Elena openly, despite her modest background. Several neighboring pack leaders, accustomed to political alliances secured through traditional marriage arrangements between noble families, expressed concern about the precedent set by Kellen choosing a partner outside such established conventions. Some worried that abandoning traditional expectations might weaken important political relationships that had historically been cultivated through carefully arranged unions between prominent families. "I understand their concerns," Kellen explained to Elena one evening as they discussed the growing political tensions surrounding their relationship. "Though I refuse to allow outdated tradition to dictate my personal happiness or the genuine partnership I seek in building my future." "Perhaps we should consider how to address their concerns constructively," Elena suggested thoughtfully, rather than simply dismissing them entirely. "Political stability matters significantly for the well-being of everyone within your territory, Kellen. I would not wish our happiness to come at the cost of broader instability that might harm innocent people." Kellen studied her with renewed appreciation at this practical wisdom, once again struck by her ability to consider broader consequences beyond immediate personal desires. "What do you propose?" Elena considered the question carefully before responding. "Perhaps rather than viewing our relationship as abandoning tradition entirely, we could demonstrate that genuine partnership, based on shared values and mutual respect, ultimately produces stronger, more resilient bonds than arrangements based purely on political calculation. Show them through our actions, rather than simply dismissing their concerns through royal authority alone." This approach proved remarkably effective over the following months, as Elena and Kellen worked together to demonstrate genuine partnership in addressing the practical needs of Kellen's territory. Elena established a formal healing program that extended proper medical training and resources to smaller packs throughout the region, ensuring that communities previously lacking adequate care could access the kind of skilled treatment she herself had once provided informally. This initiative proved enormously popular among the various packs within Kellen's broader territory, gradually shifting public perception away from concerns about Elena's modest origins and toward genuine appreciation for the tangible benefits her presence brought to the entire region. Neighboring pack leaders, who had initially expressed skepticism about the unconventional relationship, began recognizing the genuine value Elena brought, beyond simple romantic partnership, appreciating her practical contributions to regional well-being. As their partnership continued strengthening both personally and politically, Kellen found himself increasingly confident in his decision to pursue Elena, despite the initial complications her modest background had introduced. Their relationship, built on genuine mutual respect and shared commitment to meaningful values rather than calculated political advantage, proved considerably more resilient than many traditional arrangements that lacked such authentic foundation. During one particularly significant evening, several months after their formal acknowledgement of their relationship, Kellen invited Elena to join him for a quiet dinner within his private chambers, away from the usual formality of court gatherings. The atmosphere felt intimate and relaxed, candles casting warm light across the room as they enjoyed a meal prepared specifically according to Elena's preferences. "I have been reflecting recently," Kellen said, once their meal had concluded, "on everything that has transpired since that first missed ceremony so many months ago. It strikes me as remarkable how completely different our lives have become as a result of your decision to help a wounded stranger that night." "I often think about that as well," Elena admitted, smiling softly at the memory. "I never could have imagined, kneeling beside Colin in that forest clearing, that such a simple choice would eventually lead to everything we have built together since. Perhaps that is precisely the lesson worth remembering, Kellen suggested thoughtfully. That genuine character, expressed through small, seemingly inconsequential choices, often shapes destiny far more powerfully than grand, deliberate plans ever could. Had you attended that ceremony as originally intended, following convention rather than compassion, we might never have discovered what we now share together. Elena reached across the table, taking his hand in her own, feeling gratitude wash over her for the unexpected path that had brought them together, despite such improbable beginnings. I am grateful every single day for the choice I made that night, Kellen. Not simply because it led me to you, but because it reminded me that staying true to genuine values, even when doing so seems inconvenient or costly in the moment, ultimately leads toward outcomes far more meaningful than convenient compromise ever could. As their conversation continued deep into the evening, both of them reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this point, Elena felt a profound sense of contentment settling over her, a certainty that whatever challenges might yet arise in their continuing partnership, they possessed the genuine foundation of mutual respect and shared values necessary to navigate any future difficulty together successfully. Neither of them could have anticipated, sitting together in that quiet, candlelit room, just how significant the following weeks would prove, as Kellen began preparing for a decision that would formally and permanently unite their futures together in a manner that would finally silence any remaining doubts about the genuine, lasting nature of their unconventional but deeply authentic partnership. Kellen spent the following weeks in careful preparation, consulting quietly with his most trusted advisors, including Owen and Derek, about the proper way to formally declare Elena as his chosen mate, a decision that carried significant weight and permanent consequence within their traditions. Unlike the casual arrangements sometimes made through the mating ceremony, a formal declaration of this nature represented a lifelong commitment recognized throughout the entire region, binding Kellen and Elena together in a partnership that would influence not only their personal lives but the broader political and social fabric of his territory. He decided against another grand, formal ceremony similar to the one Elena had originally missed, recognizing that such traditional formality felt somehow inappropriate given the genuinely unconventional path that had brought them together. Instead, he began planning something more meaningful, a gathering that would honor both their personal connection and the broader community that had ultimately benefited from Elena's presence within his life and territory. Meanwhile, Elena continued her healing work throughout this period, unaware of the specific preparations Kellen was making, though she sensed a growing anticipation in his demeanor whenever they spent time together, a barely contained excitement that suggested something significant was approaching. She found herself equally hopeful about their future together, though she remained patient, trusting that whatever Kellen intended to reveal would unfold according to its own proper timing. The day finally arrived nearly a year after that fateful night, when Elena had first chosen to abandon the traditional ceremony to help a wounded stranger in the forest. Kellen arranged for a gathering at the same small village where their unusual story had originally begun, inviting not only prominent members of his court, but also the ordinary villagers, healers, and pack members who had witnessed and supported the early stages of their relationship, including Hazel and Colin, both of whom had played significant roles in bringing Elena and Kellen together. Elena arrived at the gathering unaware of its true purpose, believing it to be simply another community celebration related to the expanding healing program she had established throughout the region. As she moved through the familiar village clearing, greeting old friends and acquaintances who had witnessed the beginning of her unexpected journey, she noticed Kellen approaching with an expression of nervous anticipation, unlike anything she had witnessed from him before. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying unusual emotion as he took her hands in his own, guiding her toward the center of the gathered crowd. "I wanted to bring you back here, to this very place, where our story truly began, to make something official that has already been true in my heart for longer than I care to admit." The crowd fell silent, sensing the significance of the moment unfolding before them, as Kellen knelt before Elena, his expression open and vulnerable in a way rarely witnessed by anyone beyond his closest confidants. "Nearly a year ago, you chose to abandon everything expected of you that evening, to help a stranger, whose life meant nothing to you, beyond the simple fact that he needed assistance. That choice, born from genuine compassion, rather than calculated advantage, revealed a character so rare and valuable that I have spent every day since, grateful for the circumstances that eventually brought us together. Elena, I do not simply wish to acknowledge you as someone significant within my life. I wish to formally declare you as my chosen mate, my equal partner in building a future together that reflects the genuine values we both hold dear. Tears streamed freely down Elena's face as she absorbed the full weight of his words, memories of that difficult night flooding back, the uncertainty and fear she had felt kneeling beside a wounded stranger, never imagining that such a simple choice would eventually lead to this remarkable moment. She thought of her mother's initial worry, of Vivian's jealous schemes, of every challenge they had overcome together throughout the past year, each obstacle only strengthening the genuine foundation of their partnership. Kellen, she said, her voice thick with emotion, when I made that choice a year ago, I never imagined it would lead me here, to this moment, standing before you and everyone who has supported us throughout this journey. I accept your declaration wholeheartedly, not because of your position or power, but because of everything you have shown me about genuine character, patience, and devotion throughout our time together. The crowd erupted in joyful celebration as Kellen rose, pulling Elena into a warm embrace that finally, publicly and permanently, sealed their bond before the community that had witnessed the beginning of their unexpected story. Colin, standing nearby with visible pride and satisfaction, exchanged a knowing glance with Hazel, both of them reflecting on how their small roles in that initial crisis had ultimately contributed to bringing together two people whose partnership now promised genuine benefit, not only to themselves, but to the broader community they served together. In the months and years that followed, Elena and Kellen's partnership continued flourishing, their combined efforts expanding access to quality healing throughout the region, strengthening political stability through demonstrated genuine partnership rather than calculated convenience, and ultimately serving as an inspiring example throughout neighboring territories that authentic character and genuine values mattered far more than traditional convention or superficial qualification when building lasting, meaningful relationships. Elena never forgot the lesson she had learned, that fateful night in the forest, the understanding that staying true to genuine compassion and integrity, even when doing so required sacrificing conventional opportunity, ultimately led toward outcomes more meaningful and fulfilling than any calculated pursuit of advantage ever could have achieved. Her story, the healer who skipped the mating ceremony to help a stranger and found herself discovered by the Alpha King the very next day, became a cherished tale throughout the region, reminding countless others that genuine character and authentic values, expressed through simple acts of compassion, often shape destiny in ways far more profound than anyone could have anticipated in the moment such choices are made. And so, in the quiet village clearing where their unlikely story had first begun, surrounded by the community that had supported them through every challenge along the way, Elena and Kellen stood together as genuine partners, their bond forged not through tradition or calculation, but through authentic compassion, patience, and mutual respect that would guide them faithfully through all the years still waiting to unfold before them.